But if God doesn't exist, then we have no justification for the things we assume, and everything just collapses.
I mean, do we even have to comment on that one? I mean, just assuming that everything needs to be based on God, because like science won't work if there is no God. So like 2 plus 2 is not 4 unless there is a God. If there is a God, then it's 4. But if there is not a God...
But you're touching upon a very interesting part of logic, because depends, again, this would be way more interesting if we weren't trying to prove the existence of Christian God through this, but like some other belief system, because 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4 if mathematics doesn't exist. And what is mathematics? Did we make mathematics up? Did mathematics always exist? If mathematics are some kind of intrinsic feature of the universe, then why are they?
But if you have one cup and the second cup, then you have 2 cups. So it's not really mathematics, it's just logic.
But it is mathematics, though.
Hello, guys.
Hi, everyone. It's Weronika
And this is Waldemar.
And today we're coming back with some religious discussion. Yet again, we are watching a video by the channel Redeemed Zoomer. Am I saying that
yes.
right? We watched the story of the entire Bible, I guess. I guess we watched that one. We had a lot to say about that, and I think you guys still watched it, even though the video is 40 minutes long, and you engaged in some discussion with us, which I really liked.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, really, very much. So we thought maybe you'd like another one.
Yeah, so be ready for a lot of pausing, because in this sort of videos we tend to pause a lot and discuss. So if it's not something for you, if you just want a reaction, then, I don't know, skip it or just don't watch it.
Or skip to the parts that you want to see. But but it's more of a discussion video, I expect.
Yeah, we prefer those videos. They are much longer. They take more time, but we prefer those kind of videos. It's not like we don't like watching clips of stand-up, but we feel that we are contributing more to the channel.
Yeah, contributing more, and it's a bit freer as well, because with stand-up or other reactions, you have very set expectations already of what the format of the video should look like, so we try to confirm so that it's pleasant for you to watch. But with this, I feel like we can just do whatever.
Yeah, and this will be like some sort of 2 parts video. We won't release it the same day. It will be day after day. But this is the all arguments for God explained in 10 minutes. And the next video that we will record soon and we will upload it next day is 10 atheist arguments answered in 10 minutes. Yeah, so let's begin. I think we'll probably pause after every segment, so after every argument. Let's begin.
Let's see.
Unless you're raised in a Baptist Sunday school, you probably think that if you believe in God, you should be able to explain why. Luckily, Christians and other philosophers have been answering this question for over 2,000 years. Evidentialism tries to argue for God by giving evidence of supernatural events. For example, a lot of Christians think the resurrection of Christ can be historically proven because there were a lot of eyewitnesses who all died for their faith, and generally people don't die for something they know isn't true. Sometimes people give evidence of natural things like demonic possessions, where people start speaking in languages they don't know, or near-death experiences where people see things outside their body that they shouldn't have been able to see. The moral argument...
Okay, now I will pause. Alright, so when it comes to this argument, then, well, I think he mentioned exorcisms, and I think the Catholic Church even zachęca.
Entices? Encourages?
Encourages, sorry. He encourages people to take parts in exorcisms. Mm-hmm. They say it's good for your soul, for your spirit, for your faith. Then I encourage you to see exorcisms and how it looks like. Then I think it will answer everything about this argument, because I think you will see that they are really not possessed.
Yeah.
People are not possessed by the devil, by evil spirits. And the argument that, the whole argument about the miracles and that we can see them, and that's the argument for God, it doesn't really work. There is this, not a company, but like an organization, and they have the scholarship, the reward, for anyone who will prove any unnatural event ever. That it will be 100% not possible to explain by science. And there is like $1 million, I think, reward. And it still wasn't taken by anyone. So I think that answers this argument. We are not able to prove any of the miracles by the church. And if you will look at the things that different churches regard as miracles, they are not really miracles. Like, there is no circumstance ever, that never happened for anyone that they have like an amputation and then their hand would grow back. Never. But remissions of cancer are considered miracles. Yet they happen to both believers and non-believers, regardless of their faith. They can be Muslims, they can be Christians, they can be Hindu, and they have cancer remissions.
Yeah, but I can this I can believe, because there is a lot of like talk about the placebo effects and how you approach your sickness, it can affect it. So this I can believe. I can believe that you believe so strongly that the priest touched you, and you're so positive that sometimes you're lucky enough that your body is able to fight that disease. And this I can believe, but I don't think it's...
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that it's not a proof for God.
Yeah.
That God came from heaven and take out your cancer.
It's proof for something we don't understand about how brains and body works. But it's not for... Yeah. Because it works the same whether it's, a motivational speaker or a priest or your family member.
Or you have this miracle often that the communion had particles of blood on it. Yeah. And every time they prove that it's like a bacteria that turns red. But the church is like, no, a miracle. It's a body of Christ.
The miracles I like the most are the miracles when someone sees something, like they see the face of Christ somewhere, and that's the miracle. I'm like, I see faces everywhere all the time.
And I mean,
it's a normal. It's called something. This phenomenon.
To be fair, church. I mean, I'm still referring to the Catholic Church when I'm saying church because I was born Catholic, so I am in no position to speak about other churches because I don't have a knowledge. But I will talk about the biggest one. So I think it covers like the whole idea of religion. They don't accept every event as a miracle. They conduct some investigation, some research, and very often those miracles are rejected. Fair. But even the ones that are accepted, they wouldn't be accepted by anyone from the field of science, by anyone who is non-believer. They would explain it by like natural remission of cancer, like a bacteria on a piece of bread. So, and also I will finish this very quick. The part about the Bible, that the resurrection of Christ was a fact because there were people who believed in that and they died for that. Like in the Bible, there also says that when Jesus died, the corpses
rose from the graves
and were walking on the streets.
But
yet somehow no evidence of that, no written history details from any historians from that time. And the region when Jesus was living at the time was the Roman Empire. So it's not like some village, in the jungle in South America.
Yeah,
Africa.
there were records from that time and quite detailed records. So it's quite strange that such an anomaly would not have been recorded anywhere. Yeah.
Exactly.
Is basically objective morality is only real if God is real, but objective morality is real, so therefore God is real. Question: is cannibalism good or bad? I think it's good. I think it's bad. I think it's good. I think it's bad. Which one of them is correct? Now, I'm assuming you agree with this one. If you don't, please stay away from me. But how do you know that he's actually correct? How do you know that these aren't just different opinions? Our little friend here can only be objectively correct if there's a supreme authority that says cannibalism is bad. And that supreme authority is what we would call God.
There was an extremely wrong explanation of this idea. Can't think of a better example from the top of my head, but cannibalism isn't in every single situation always objectively bad. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, there are.
what if I am locked in a cell with someone to die from starvation, and this person, imagine an ideal scenario, and this person is already dying, and they say to me, okay, I consent that you eat me when I die because I want you to survive a little bit, because in 2 weeks they're going to open this cell, and all you have to do is survive these 2 weeks, and I'm already dying. And then they die, and you eat them. I'm assuming, you don't get sick because they were sick, blah, blah, blah. You just eat them.
And you
How's
survive.
bad?
Yeah, and there are many events of that in history, and even in the recent history, where there was this plane crash in Andes. I think it's called Andes, those mountains in South America. And they crashed, and people survived only because they eat the bodies of the people who died in this catastrophe.
Yeah.
So
If you would have to say killing someone for the sole purpose of eating them, or maybe killing someone in general is bad, but not cannibalism. Because that's
yeah,
just
but
a stupid example.
even this example was bad. But even this whole idea that there needs to be some objective higher power to say what's good and what's bad, and yet we cannot agree what this supreme power is saying, because a couple of 100 years ago he was saying that this was bad, and then he changed his mind and it was okay then, but then later it was not okay again. So is it really a supreme power, or just some people who decide that, okay, at this time we can say that this is bad, but later we'll have to change it because people will change their morality?
Yeah, there's a lot about these arguments in Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. If you like Dostoevsky, then you'll know. I really like this book, but it's really like there's a whole chapters about this argument that if you don't believe in God, then you can't be moral. It's really entertaining. You can find excerpts from it as well, just from what I think it's Ivan who talks about it. You can find excerpts from that and read it because it's quite entertaining what they talk about.
Argument is basically that something must have caused everything else. Everything that happens has a cause, and that has a cause, and that has a cause. So where does this go? Does this go on forever? That's not possible. At some point, there needs to be a first cause of everything else. There needs to be an unmoved mover, an uncaused causer, an unchanged changer. It needs to be eternal, because if it ever starts or stops existing, that's change, and it can't do that. It needs to be outside the universe, because everything in the universe is caused. It also needs to be all-powerful, because if it can't be moved, but it can move anything else, that means it's all-powerful. And this is what we would call God. I don't get it. Okay, let's make it even harder then. Everything is a mixture of act, meaning what it is, and potency, meaning what it could be. For example, a baby actually is alive, and it could be an adult. An apple actually is red, and it has the potency to be eaten. So if you eat an apple, you're actualizing its potency to be eaten. But you also are a mixture of act and potency. For example, you have the potency to be strong, but you're not. Anytime something changes you, it's actualizing a potency in you. Anytime a change happens, you have one thing actualizing another, but you can't go back forever, so eventually you need to go back to an unactualized actualizer, which we call God. God is the being that's pure act, meaning he is everything that he possibly could be. This means he must be eternal, because if he's not eternal, that means he has the potential to not exist, but there is no potential in God, so that means God must always exist. Also, if God is everything he could be, he's also all-powerful, because he cannot change, and that means nothing else could possibly do anything to God. This argument's the most complicated. It's originally from Aristotle, and it's also used by Thomas Aquinas in Summa Contra Gentiles. Pascal's wager is
I will take this one really quickly, because this argument makes sense on some level, because for me too it's difficult to imagine like there was a Big Bang, but what caused the Big Bang, and how it was possible that there was nothing and now we have all those elements and stars and planets, blah blah blah. But for some reason people who use this argument don't use this argument when it comes to the idea of God. Like, somehow, nothing could be started on its own. The universe could not start on its own, but yet somehow God could start on its own. No one needed, nothing had to start the God. Mm-hmm. God was just there somehow, always. So it's like playing the football to one goal. And yeah, I think that was it. That's what I wanted to say.
I think it's just, assigning divinity to something you can't understand. That's how I see it. But I think before you decide to be an atheist, you should, because I'm not an atheist exactly, I'm more an agnostic, so you should look at all the arguments as well. And these kind of arguments, I wouldn't say they convince me, but I know there's a lot to think when they are more rhetorical about extremes, for example. So even the moral argument that they said before, you could say that some people say God is the extreme good, so the best good that you could imagine, that's God. It's a bit abstract when you think about it. They very often talk about extremes. So like here they said, through logic, technically, that if this is possible, then it follows that this exists, which isn't so much different than some theoretical physics, like how we talk about gravity or quantum mechanics. But it's also just because some theory in mathematics is possible, you can create entire universes with mathematics, but that does not mean that they really exist.
Mm.
But sometimes they do. So, we don't know. And the same, just one thing I wanted to add, another extreme kind of argument, I don't think it's going to be here, is also that I've read it in a book that I forgot the title, but I'm going to put it because it's a very interesting book about the Eastern religions. But it's that everything, because you evolve, everything goes towards perfection. So the perfection that you achieve is God. Mm-hmm. It's one of the religions where God is not personal, so it's just, different. And I'm not saying I agree with this or don't agree with this. I just think it's interesting to, even as a mental exercise, even if you're not interested in the subject of whether it is true or not.
Simpler, and it's more of a thought experiment than an argument. Let's say you're an atheist, and atheism turns out to be correct. Nothing happens after you die. Well then, you don't really gain or lose anything, it's just kind of neutral for you. But let's say you're an atheist and it turns out you're wrong and God is real, then it could be very bad for you. Now let's say you believe in God and it turns out atheism is correct, well then you still don't gain or lose anything, it's just neutral. But if you believe in God and God is real, then you could gain everything. So between these two possibilities, which one do you want to bet on? This one gives you a much better chance, so it's better for you to believe in God. The Teleological...
Pascal's wager, I don't think it's even worth discussing. Everyone knows that and it's not really a proof, it's like a concept.
But there's one aspect of Pascal wager that I find enticing, and it's what he said before, that it's proof that people had this out-of-body experiences when they were dying. And I think that's, I know you can't really treat your brain like that, but if you could, because if you are dying and you're convinced until the second you stop existing that there is God and that you're going there, that sounds like a very good deal to me. But I don't know if we can artificially do it. I mean, of course, setting aside the aspect that you live in a lie.
But you need to.
You'd be happy.
But you need to have a real faith. Yeah. And Pascal wager is not a real faith.
Yeah, it's not based on real faith. That's true.
One more thing I wanted to say about the argument before the Pascal wager, quickly, that people don't notice how easier it would be to explain the concept of God if you wouldn't assume that He is all-powerful, all-knowledgeable, omnipotent, and that He was eternal. I mean, how much more likely would it be that God was more like us, but kind of a more powerful, like an alien or something? It's much more likely that the God is like us, and that would explain all His mistakes that He made. That would explain why there is so much evil on this world, because He's not all-powerful. He cannot do everything. He was able to create us, create life, but he cannot come from heaven and stop Hitler from doing Holocaust. He cannot cure cancer because he doesn't have knowledge to do that. So
I get what you mean, but then what do you need this God for? Because I need God so that He promises me to live forever and I will be super happy. But if He doesn't have these super magical powers to make me super happy after my death.
But He has some powers,
okay.
But not all the powers.
Okay.
For example, there is a life after death, because we live in a simulation and He runs the simulation.
Okay. But He's not.
But He is not
only
able.
Powerful. Okay.
But He needs to play by the rules of physics. He has
kind
tools,
of like Greek gods.
He has tools, to utilize them to his advantage, but he cannot break them.
So like other mythologies, a little bit.
Kind of. Like more human God. And I think more human God is more probable than this than this weird being, omnipotent.
But then where did that God come from?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer.
I don't know, I'm just wondering.
But he went from somewhere.
Okay.
Maybe there is a species of people like gods, and everyone has its own universe, to govern.
Okay.
And that's, for me, is more likely than one being running all this big universe with life only on this little planet, and somehow he is omnipotent, somehow he is all-powerful, all knows everything, yet he is so passive.
Yeah, I don't know, it doesn't make sense. Like, personal God doesn't make sense to me either, so I agree with you 100%.
Argument says that stuff in the universe seems to have a purpose, so that means the universe must have had a designer. If you found a machine lying around, you would assume that somebody designed the machine. So the teleological argument tries to argue that the universe works like a machine, so somebody must have designed the universe. Things in nature, like the human cell or the ecosystem of the world, are very complex and they work like a machine. Now, Darwinian evolution can explain why that is, but there's also things Darwinian evolution can't explain, like the 4 constants of the universe. There are physical constants like the gravitational constant and the electron charge, the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force that are perfectly fine-tuned, such that if they were even the slightest bit different, the entire universe would immediately collapse in on itself. The ontological...
This really annoys me.
I think it's very simple. If anything would change like this 4 constances, then we wouldn't be here to observe that, so therefore there would be no need to this argument. And it's very possible that the universe was tipped in this direction or in this direction, and therefore there was no life. And until it reached the point where it was possible for life to be created, then life was created.
Yeah,
and then we are here and we can observe this and think about this, but it doesn't mean that someone set this to be in this exact position. It's just because it is in this position, then it was possible for us to be created, to be here and to observe this.
Yeah, I think we discussed the like anthropological theory in some other video.
Yeah, I think so too.
I
think so too.
Yeah.
Logical argument says God exists because of the way he is. Bruh. No, seriously. God is defined as that than which nothing greater can be conceived.
That's what I said.
That means God must be all-powerful, because being all-powerful is greater than having limited power. God must be all-knowing, because being all-knowing is greater than having limited knowledge. God must be all-good, because being all-good is greater than being flawed. And God must exist, because existing is greater than not existing. Wait, just because we can think of a greatest possible being doesn't mean it actually exists. Well, actually it does, because existing in reality is greater than just existing in the mind. Okay, but I could use that to argue for the existence of the greatest possible pizza. Well, actually, no, you can't, because the definition of pizza implies limitations like a limited size and able to be broken. If you had a pizza that was indestructible, eternal, all-powerful, and infinitely large, it wouldn't be a pizza anymore, it would just be God. Basically, if your pizza gets infinitely great, it'll turn into God. There is also
this is just a mental gymnastics. It's not really an argument. Just because something could be this way doesn't mean that there is, and you can call it however you want, God or pizza, whatever. But just because it could be such.
Yeah, but I think here, because it depends. Is this an argument for Christianity? No. Is this an argument for something else? Possibly. I'm not saying about personal God anymore, but like an argument for there being like abstract concepts, maybe.
I mean, I understand this argument, and it's logical, but it doesn't prove anything for me. So it's not a proof, or even an argument.
The argument from personal experience. It may sound silly, but everyone does see the world through the lens of their own personal experience. A lot of people are convinced God exists either because of supernatural events they've seen, or because of answered prayers, or just coincidences in their life. So this is very good at convincing oneself that God exists, but not very good at convincing other people.
Sorry guys, we had a small hiccup, so we're not gonna pretend and line up the cuts. We had a technical issue.
There was no memory on memory card. So.
Yeah, because we are such hard workers and we recorded so much.
Yeah, so we start...
Oh, we are just talking too much.
From where we stopped.
Yes.
The Transcendental argument basically says without God, nothing can make sense at all. There's a lot of things we assume, but we can't prove. We assume that logic works. We assume that there's consistency in the natural world. We assume that truth exists, but we can't prove any of these things scientifically, because these are the basic assumptions we need to make to even do science. All of these things make sense if we presuppose a worldview where God exists, because then we can say all these other things are grounded in the mind of God. But if God doesn't exist, then we have no justification for the things we assume, and everything just collapses.
I mean, do we even have to comment on that one? I mean, just assuming that everything needs to be based on God because, like, science won't work if there is no God. So, like, 2 plus 2 is not 4 unless there is a God. If there is a God, then it's 4. But if there is not a God...
But you're touching upon a very interesting part of logic, because depends... Again, this would be way more interesting if we weren't trying to prove the existence of Christian God through this, but like some other belief system, because 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4 if mathematics doesn't exist. And what is mathematics? Did we make mathematics up? Did mathematics always exist? If mathematics are some kind of intrinsic feature of the universe, then why are they?
But if you have one cup and the second cup, then you have 2 cups. So it's not really mathematics, it's just logic.
But it is mathematics, though.
But you know what? It's like, if you really have to play all those games just to prove that some imaginary being is true, and I think God should up his game, because it shouldn't be like that. I mean, if we are really his children, then he really shouldn't give us, let us being like that.
Yeah, I want to say I 100% agree with you, and I agree about everything you say about Christianity. I'm just trying to add some flavor to it because my beliefs are a bit different than yours. But yeah, I can't reback what you're saying because I agree 100% with what you're saying on this aspect.
The mind, or consciousness, which says consciousness cannot be explained naturally. Generally, the atheist explanation of consciousness is that our brain is just a very advanced biological machine, but unlike our minds, machines can be reduced to their parts. Now, our brain can be reduced to its brain cells, but that's not the same as the experience of consciousness. For example, you could find a part of our brain that sees the color yellow, but that's not the same as the experience of seeing yellowness. You cannot study consciousness scientifically because one can only observe one's own consciousness. For example, there is no way to know if we all see the same colors. Who knows, maybe yellow looks like this to me. For all you know, you could be the only person who exists. A single atom is not conscious. 2 atoms are not conscious. A bunch of atoms are not conscious. So even if you have a complex system, it's still just a complex arrangement of atoms which are not conscious. So where does consciousness come from? So this isn't exactly an argument for God, but it is an argument for the human soul because it shows you need something immaterial to explain consciousness. Then
I mean, if I would have to choose what I think on this regard, and I think that it's just like a very complicated machine, our brain. But yeah, this argument I kind of respect. I mean, I understand where this is coming from, and that's true, that our consciousness is too advanced to be explained in some simple way. But on the other hand, I also think that we are not done, as a species with our research and with our science. And I think just because we cannot explain something now doesn't mean we will be able to explain it 1,000 years from now on. Like many things that were very mythical hundreds of years ago, but now we're like, okay, yeah, because this works that way and this works that way, and therefore you have this like evolution and universe and stuff like that, physics. So I think it is something that we will be able to explain later, not in our lifetime, I think, but
yeah, I'd imagine
later.
At some point, yes, and also other aspects of it and questions that we can't even think of right now. We will have answers to, maybe.
mathematics, which says there's an infinite reality higher than our physical universe.
Wait, but if there is no God, then we cannot do mathematics, right? So how can we have mathematical argument if for mathematical
Maybe
argument...
it's a circular argument, wait to hear it.
So basic math isn't all that special. For example, the number 5 corresponds to 5 apples, and 5 times 3 corresponds to 3 groups of 5 apples. But the more you get into advanced math, the more math starts to get disconnected from our world, but it still works. For example, there's real numbers, which are numbers that correspond to real things, but there's also imaginary numbers that are just as mathematically real, but they don't correspond to the real world, which is why they're not called real numbers. But they still exist mathematically, even though they don't exist in the real world. Let's look at the 5 most important numbers in mathematics. 1 is obviously important because it's the basis for all real numbers. 0 is very important because it's necessary for doing algebra. I is very important because it's the basis for all imaginary numbers. E is very important for doing exponential functions, and pi is necessary for doing math with circles. Now, all these numbers are seemingly unrelated to each other, but they fit together beautifully in this equation called Euler's identity. It was discovered by Euler, one of the greatest mathematicians in history, and he saw this as proof that math was designed by God. Also, Euler was a devout Calvinist. More evidence that math has a designer is the Mandelbrot set, which is generated by a very simple equation in the complex plane, but it produces infinite detail. You can keep zooming in on this shape and it will keep generating more and more complexity, even though nobody designed this. The Mandelbrot set is infinite, and it's not found anywhere in our universe, so that means whatever created it must also be infinite and not from our universe. So those are the common arguments for God, and by the way...
So where this came from, this Mandelbrot something?
I don't know. I've never heard much about it, actually. But I've listened to a lot of scientists say that indeed there is a lot of correlations in the words of physics that look very pretty. With the stable numbers. I forgot exactly what it is, but like the speed of light is exactly something multiplied by something else. And it's really pleasing, and I heard some of these say that there might be something to it, but also there was this one guy, I forgot his name, right in the description, but he had this whole talk about the amount of mosquitoes in relation to the amount of people, and it made it such a big deal, because there is a lot of numbers that you can take and make. There are even memes like that something, just because something makes a pretty number doesn't mean it's correlated in any way. So, yeah, it's nice that he chose these numbers, but are they the only numbers that we use in mathematics, or are they just 5 of the important numbers?
And just because Euler said it doesn't mean that he was right.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that because this equation was correct, it's not proving that existence, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's like I said, there's like in theoretical physics, there's a lot of geniuses, like Einstein, they will come up with something in their head, and then indeed this can be proven, or like Hawking, but not every theory is proven.
Yeah, and also
something that can work on paper and on your board, but that doesn't really mean it exists, or does it? Maybe it does. Yeah, maybe it's a different kind of dimension.
The argument that he made was that it proves other dimensions, other like bigger reality, because there are numbers that are not correlated to our world, but they are still working. But also from the history we know that we have numbers that we didn't know what to do with them. They were working, but we didn't have any use for them. But then as the technology advanced, then we had use for those numbers, like for the space travels, for the black holes and stuff like that. So it's possible that all those numbers that we have no use for them right now, but maybe later we will be like, oh, but we can use this math.
But what you're saying is kind of making maths like this purposeful feature of the universe, which what you're saying right now sounds a bit more spiritual to me. If you think about it, because you're like, oh, but later as we will develop, we will discover that this thing that we stumbled upon mathematics, which maybe we made up or maybe it existed, that we dabbed into, then it actually was there for a purpose because we went into the direction that we needed.
But I don't.
You know what I mean?
I'm not saying that there is a purpose for that. It's more like, for example, like we found. Like the mold, it worked. Mold, on the food.
Yeah.
It is used to create antibiotics, and it was always there, but we didn't just knew how to use it.
And that doesn't mean it's put there.
Then later we were able to take this mold and use it for something, but we didn't know yet for what. And then there was this guy called
I don't know.
oh,
The inventor of penicillin, but I don't remember what his name was.
Yeah, but he came around and he was like, oh, we can use this for that. And we were like, oh, great.
Yeah.
So I think it's very possible that it will be like that with many more things in the future.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah. Just the last remark
Fleming?
from me. Sorry?
Fleming?
Yeah, quite possible. But
The guys who invented this?
I'm not sure, we'll have to check. Well, just a closing remark from me about this video in general, because we just closed this argument.
But we didn't finish.
Oh, we didn't?
Yeah, no.
Oh, it's 15 seconds.
Wait, this video wasn't intending to make any of these arguments. It would take a much longer video to do any of these arguments justice. It's just to give you guys an overview of these arguments so you can look more into them yourselves if you want. And now it's time for the best argument of all, which is, trust me, bro.
Actually, he referred to exactly what I was going to say, because I was going to say a very good job at compiling these arguments, and I understand not being able to present them very well, because I also cannot present my thoughts very well. That's why I'm not a public speaker, or I don't advocate for anything, because I can't really do it. And I was going to say, I think it doesn't do justice to these arguments, because they are explained poorly. But now he says he just wanted to explain what they are about, and you can explore them. And then I respect that. I like that. Because if it was done with the thought behind that, oh, I gave you all these arguments, then absolutely not, because it was too shallow, I think. And maybe... But again, I don't want to say he doesn't have the understanding of what these arguments are. I think it's just kind of he's still much better than me, but it's the same kind of lack of skill that I also wouldn't be able to pick and choose something to summarize it in 1 minute, so it gives exactly all of my knowledge.
Yeah, and I'm also not an expert to make counter-arguments for all of that.
Yeah.
It's just, for my simple brain, my simple knowledge, which is not great.
You're not simple.
But, those arguments are not very convincing, and what, for me, is the biggest counter-argument for that is that there should not be a need for all those arguments, because God shouldn't be like this sort of concept that we need to prove and base our life around it. It should be much more simple.
For me, there's a lot, just a lot of disconnect between science and philosophy, and sometimes even spirituality, and the God that you have as a part of a religion. For me, those are such different. It sounds stupid, but these are very often disconnected. And it's very difficult to try to put it into that frame, because you have the book where everything is written exactly as it is. And then you make a whole philosophy and scientific arguments for it, but you're not supposed to. You're just supposed to take it for what it is.
That's the thing also. Like, science creates another new concepts, like an evolution, for example. And then all the religions come and they're like, oh, but if we look at this in that way, then we can use this to prove that God exists. But before that, they were like attacking this whole idea for like years and years and years. And after it was not possible to attack them and they were forced to accept them, then they were working hard on how to use those new concepts to prove God again. Yeah. All right, that was a long video, so let's just say...
Bye.
Yeah.
See you in the next one.
Bye.